you like to know more? Would 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 you like to know more?
Welcome to live show 129, broadcasting live from the heart of Minsk, Belarus on May 4th, 2025. May the 4th be with you. It's 8 p.m. here, 6 p.m. in London, 1 p.m. in New York, and 4 a.m. in Sydney. And wherever you are and tuning in from, we're thrilled to have you with us on Rumble, YouTube, and X for a non-holds-barred dive into the stories shaking the globe. First, I'd like to thank our show's sponsor for the second time in a row, the Emotional Support Animals Registry in the UK and the EU, and their website addresses are on the screen below and in the description. Check them out, especially if you need an emotional support animal. Also, they've got an emotional support animal show on YouTube. The world, as it has been for many months now, on the edge, and tonight we're unpacking chaos head-on. From President Trump's tariffs sparking global trade war to Huawei's game-changing AI breakthroughs, from Yellowstone's rumbling volcano to the elite's secretive survival plans, we're peeling back the layers of today's most explosive issues. We'll also challenge narratives on Russia's moves in Ukraine, debunk the Holodomor myth, unpack the misunderstood Budapest Memorandum, and explore the F-35 stealth jet fiasco that's burdening taxpayers and rippling worldwide. So grab a seat, hit that thumbs up, share the screen, and drop your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear from you. Let's cut the noise through the noise and get to the truth together. This is live show 129, and it's time to ignite the conversation with no stars required. Oh, one more thing. This week, Wednesday, we've got a special guest from the UK on the show. We're going to have a live show on Wednesday. And on Sunday, next Sunday, we've got a special guest from Germany, a journalist who's been to Ukraine on both sides, and he'll give his thoughts. So let's get going. Economic upheaval. Trump's tariffs trigger a global economic chaos as trade war escalates. President Trump's aggressive tariff policies have plunged the global economy into turmoil, igniting a trade war that threatens to push the world towards a prolonged recession. With the United States and China locked in a fierce battle of retaliatory tariffs, businesses, consumers, and policymakers are grappling with soaring costs, supply chain disruptions, and deepening uncertainty. And there's been a dramatic Liberation Day which sparks controversy. On April 2nd, Trump stood in the White House, dramatic flourish. He declared the day Liberation Day for the US businesses, vowing to free them from unfair competitive landscape through steep tariffs. The workers, voicing gratitude, lauded Trump's policies for rekindling hope as the promised a resurgence in American manufacturing to greatness. Yet, Whether this vision will materialize remains shrouded in doubt.
And in the end, I think what's going to happen is we're going to have great deals. And by the way, if we don't have a deal with a company or a country, we're going to set the tariff. We just set the tariff. It's something that we think that will happen, I'd say, over the next couple of weeks. Wouldn't you say? I think so. Over the next 2-3 weeks, we'll be setting the number. And we're going to pick, could be for China too, could be for China. We're dealing with almost all of them. Too many to fully deal with, but we're going to be fair to them. But we're dealing with a lot of countries right now, and could be with China, but maybe we'll make a special, a deal, and we'll see what it will be. Right now, it's 145%. That's very high.
That day, U.S. markets rode a roller coaster. The Dow Jones Industrial Average closed at 225.32 points, up 0.670.9 points, up 0.08%. And the Nasdaq at 17,601 and 0.5 points, up 0.67%, despite sharp intraday plunges. The dip and recover pattern reflects investors' mixed emotions, early unease over tariff uncertainties, giving way to cautious optimism fueled by Trump's fiery rhetoric. He boasted of reversing Biden-era inflation, citing falling prices for energy, cars, and eggs, and claiming his tariffs would generate $6 trillion over a decade, a figure economists dismissed as political bravado rather than credible forecasting. Let's listen to Jeffrey Sachs.
I believe that these tariffs will never really come into effect, other than perhaps this 10% baseline. Even that, I'm not so sure. But Trump has suspended almost all the rest, except vis-a-vis China. And now the U.S. Treasury Secretary is openly saying that the dispute with China should be de-escalated as well. This is a losing position for the United States. The policies don't make sense. They have cost trillions of dollars of losses in the stock markets around the world. Nobody is winning out of this, certainly not the United States. They're not popular in the U.S. They're under legal attack because, and I agree with the assertion that Trump has exceeded his constitutional authority significantly by trying to be one-person rule when it comes to the U.S. trade system. This is not something that he has authority over. He can't just declare an emergency and then do what he wants. And I don't think that these tariffs would stand up in court. So to my mind, this is a bad policy that actually is being walked back now quite widely.
And the trade war spirals out of control. A trade war escalated in April when the US imposed 145% tariffs on Chinese imports, prompting Beijing to retaliate with 125% duties on American goods. This near-total trade embargo has crippled the $500 billion annual trade flow between the world's two largest economies. On May 2nd, China hinted at openness to negotiations, but with no concrete progress and prior denials of talks. Hopes for de-escalation remained dim.
Clarify, Mr. President, on China. Are you thinking about lowering their tariffs?
Fair deal with China. It's going to be fair.
Are you talking to them actively now?
Actively. Everything's active. Everybody wants to be a part of what we're doing. They know that they can't get away with it any longer, but they're still going to do fine. And we're going to have a country that you can be proud of, not a laughing stock all over the world for many years.
And Trump's tariffs targeting dozens of countries hit China's hardest. A brief market rally followed his April 23 suggestion of lowering Chinese tariffs, but optimism faded when Beijing refuted claims of trade talks. The US dollar slid 4% against the euro in April, underscoring investor unease over Trump's erratic strategy. At the April 2nd news conference, Trump brandished a chart alleging exorbitant tariffs imposed by other nations, but the figures such as 64% tariff for Indonesia and 50% for South Korea were later debunked as flimsy, derived from dubious calculations like dividing trade deficits by exports. South Korea's alleged 50% tariff was particularly absurd, given that the US Korea Free Trade Agreement, which slashed bilateral tariffs to near zero by 2025. And the markets in freefall. Global markets are reeling. The S&P 500, tracked by SPY ETF, climbed to $566.76 on May 2nd, after dipping to $558.47, but it remains well below its 2024 peak of $613.23. Asian and European indices have swung wildly, with Hong Kong and Japanese markets briefly buoyed by reports of Chinese easing of some US tariffs, only to crash again as tensions flared. Germany slashed its 2020. Angeles reports a one-third drop in vessel arrivals compared to 2024, signaling a collapse in global trade. South Korea's exports fell 5.2% in early April, with car and steel shipments to the US hit hardest. Oil ascendancy. Crude oil prices, volatile at $68 per barrel, reflect fleeting hopes of tariff relief overshadowed by fears of economic slowdown. Gold, a safe haven asset, soared to a record $3,300 per troy ounce in April. And the corporate carnage and consumer woes. The trade wars fallout is hammering businesses and consumers. Major US corporations, including UPS, which cut 20,000 jobs, General Motors, Kraft Heinz, Electrolux, and JetBlue, have slashed 2025 forecasts, citing tariff-driven costs and uncertainty. Adidas noted it would have to raise its revenue outlook absent of the trade chaos. US manufacturing contracted further in April, with supply chain disruptions inflating input prices. American sentiment down 32% since January, the steepest drop since 1990, driven by fear a 0.6 rise in unemployment and 770,000 job losses by year end if tariffs persist. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, raised its 2025 US inflation forecast from 3% up 1% from January, and warned of heightened recession risks. And the global economies are under siege. The global impact is severe. The IMF cut its 2025 global growth forecast to 2.8% from 3.3%, blaming Trump's tariffs. Mexico faces a projected 0.3% economic contraction, while China's 5% growth target is increasingly unattainable, with downgrades from Goldman Sachs, UBS, and the IMF. Chinese officials are pressuring third countries to restrict US sales involving Chinese minerals, further snarling supply chains. US agriculture is in a full-blown crisis, with farmers facing cancelled orders and layoffs as Chinese demand collapses. Energy firms risk losing $15 billion in annual exports to China, particularly in oil, gas, and coal. The auto industry, briefly hopeful for tariff relief on foreign parts, was left in limbo when Trump reversed course. Let's listen to Elon Musk.
I just want to emphasize that the tariff decision is entirely up to the President of the United States. I will weigh in with my advice with the President, which he will listen to my advice, but then it's up to him, of course, to make his decision. I've been on the record many times as saying that I believe lower tariffs are generally a good idea for prosperity. But this decision is fundamentally up to the elected representative of the people, being the President of the United States. So, I'll continue to advocate for lower tariffs rather than higher tariffs, but that's all I can do.
And there is historical warnings and looming risks. Economists warn that Trump's tariffs echo historical missteps like the Dingley Tariff Act of 1897, which raised the US living costs by nearly 33% over a decade, and the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930s, which deepened the Great Depression. Scholars and industry leaders predict a lose-lose scenario with adverse effects likely by mid-2025 if Trump doubles down, and there's several risks loom. Frayed alliances. Tariffs targeting allies like the EU, Canada, and Mexico have sparked threats of retaliation, risking strategic fissures and regional trade blocs forming elsewhere. The WTO erosion. unilateral tariffs violate World Trade Organization principles, potentially splintering global trade and weakening dispute resolution mechanisms. Dollar supremacy threat. Heavy onshoring could reduce demand for imports, curbing the dollar's global role. Over production and export declines may spark new trade or currency wars, risking inflation or stagflation. And it is Trump's defiant gamble. Trump remains unyielding, arguing that tariffs will revive US manufacturing and correct trade imbalances. He has claimed 200 deals are in progress, though details are absent, fueling skepticism. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent called current tariff levels unsustainable, promising clarity by Q3 2025. But negotiations with China remain stalled. Talks with Japan show some progress, but exemptions for steel, aluminium, and ore tariffs were quickly rescinded, deepening confusion. And the critics are sounding the alarm. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell warned on April 16th that tariffs could fuel inflation and stifle growth, with impacts significantly larger than anticipated. Nobel laureate Paul Krugman likened the trade collapse to post-COVID disruptions, cautioning that Trump's policies risk a global economic tailspin. The World Trade Organization and JP Morgan Chase have also flagged rising recession risks. And in conclusion, Trump's tariff-driven trade war has pushed the global economy to the brink, with markets, industries, and consumers bearing the brunt of escalating tensions. The April 2nd Liberation Day spectacle, while rallying some domestic support, rests on shaky economic ground, with dubious claims and historical precedents warning of dire consequences, while China's recent openness to talks offers faint hope. The absence of clear progress and Trump's unpredictable policy shifts keep recession fears alive. The S&P 500's fragile recovery to $566.76 signals cautious optimism, but volatility looms large. With meaningful de-escalation or diplomatic breakthroughs, the world faces entrenched inflation, widespread job losses, and deepening supply chain chaos. The coming months will be critical in determining whether Trump's high-stakes gamble reshapes global commerce or plunges the world into a deeper economic crisis. For now, the global economy remains on a knife's edge, with the path forward shrouded in uncertainty. And our first news story tonight is in the tech sector, and it's from China. Huawei's AI breakthrough signals a shift in global tech dominance. In a stunning escalation of the global AI race, Huawei has unveiled a technological marvel that could reshape the industry and challenge NVIDIA's long-standing supremacy. The Chinese tech giant's latest innovations, driven by its Ascend 910 chip and a fully independent AI ecosystem, are not only defying US sanctions, but also positioning China as a formidable leader in artificial intelligence. As the West grapples with this seismic shift, the implications for NVIDIA and the broad tech landscape are profound. Huawei's Ascend 910D, a technological triumph at the heart of Huawei's Ascent, is this chip built using 5-nanometer DUV technology, a remarkable feat given the US imposed sanctions restricting access to advanced manufacturing tools. This chip powers Huawei's Cloud Matrix 384, a system integrating 384 Ascend chips that have already demonstrated superior performance to NVIDIA's flagship H100 in selected benchmarks. This engineering breakthrough underscores China's ability to innovate under pressure, turning adversity into competitive edge. Complementing its hardware's prowess, Huawei's Harmony OS Plus servers reliance on US-based software like Microsoft and Android. This move toward a self-sufficient tech stack signals China's ambition to create a fully independent AI ecosystem free of Western influence. Meanwhile, innovations like DeepSeek R2, an AI model trained on Huawei chips at a reported 97% lower cost than OpenAI's offerings, highlight China's focus on efficiency and scalability. NVIDIA's precarious position. For NVIDIA, the rise of Huawei is a looming threat. China once accounted for 25% of NVIDIA's market, but US export bans have slashed that share to just 13%. NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang's reported trips to Beijing to salvage business ties reflect the company's desperation to retain its foothold in this critical poised to displace NVIDIA's dominance, potentially within the next 1 or 2 years. And the broad implication of Huawei's rise extends beyond a single company's market share. China is building an AI ecosystem that operates on a fundamentally different architecture from the West, reducing its dependency on US technology and setting the stage for tech decoupling. Analysts include Quantum Bird warn that this shift could mark the end of NVIDIA's monopoly, likening it to the opening of a Pandora's box for the AI industry. Additionally, China's control over rare earth minerals critical for chip production raises the specter of retaliatory export bans that could further disadvantage Western manufacturers after the Trump tariffs, which we just discussed. So what lies ahead? Huawei's trajectory suggests it could surpass NVIDIA in the AI hardware race within a few years. As China continues to refine its independent AI infrastructure, the gap between Chinese and Western AI capabilities may narrow or even reverse. The prospect of bifurcated global tech landscape with distinct Chinese and Western AI architecture poses challenges for interoperability, innovation, and geopolitical stability. For the US and its allies, the urgency to counter China's advancements with strategic investments and policies has never been greater. In conclusion, Huawei's Ascend 910D and its broader AI ecosystem represents more than just a technological leap. They signal a pivotal moment in the global balance of tech power. By overcoming US sanctions and building a self-reliant AI infrastructure, China is not only challenging NVIDIA, but also redefining the rules of an AI race. For NVIDIA and the West, the time to adapt is now. Failure to respond could cede the future of AI to a rapidly ascending China. The stakes are high, and the world is watching as this new era of technological competition unfolds. And still on technology, the USA's F-35 fiasco, Lockheed Martin's missteps, and the burden on the American taxpayers, and the global ripple effect. The F-35 Lightning II, developed by Lockheed Martin, is the most expensive weapons program in history, with a projected lifetime cost of exceeding $2 trillion. Intended for the cornerstone of the US and Allied air forces, the stealth fighter jet has been plagued by delays, technical defects, and mismanagement, raising concerns about its reliability and value. Beyond the United States, international partners like Australia and others, who have also invested heavily in the F-35, are grappling with the program's shortcomings, which threaten their defense capabilities and budgets. Critics, including voices on social media, have pointed to software failures, corporate excesses, and even diversity incentives as distractions from delivering the combat-ready aircraft. While some claims are exaggerated, the F-35's challenges demand scrutiny, especially for nations relying on it. It's been a troubled program of delays, defects, and non-combat ready jets. The F-35 program, launched in 2001, 24 years ago, aims to deliver a multi-role stealth fighter for the US Air Force, Navy, and Marine Corps, as well as international partners. However, persistent issues have hindered its progress and technology refresh. Upgrade. Its $1.8 billion effort to enhance computing power, sensors, and weapon systems have been delayed by software instability and hardware problems. Originally due in April 2023, full TR3 implementation is now expected in late 2025 this year. A 2024 government accountability report highlighted mid-flight reboots and radar electronic warfare systems, prompting the Pentagon to halt jet deliveries for a year. By mid-2024, over 100 jets were parked on Lockheed's tarmacs, creating logistic and financial strain. In July 2024, the Pentagon began accepting jets with the truncated TR3 version for training, not fully combat, leaving many aircraft short of operational readiness. Physical defects such as the F-35C's deteriorating radar-absorbent skin after months at sea reported the war zone in 2024, further compromising stealth capabilities. Engine overheating issues could add another $38 billion to life cycle costs per industry estimates. Despite these setbacks, Lockheed secured a $11.8 billion undefined contract in December 2024 for Lot 18, covering 145 jets. Critics on social media have called this a rushed deal under the Biden administration, though such contracts are standard in defense procurement. Rising costs for Lots 18 and 19, driven by inflation and reduced Pentagon orders, highlight and make the program's financial burden worse. The cost is a $2 trillion burden. The F-35's $2 trillion lifecycle cost, covering development, production and sustainment, has drawn intense criticism. Posts on social media have labelled it a government waste on an unimaginable scale.
But I want to bring us now closer to home and the F-35 program. Is the F-35 program a failure?
No, it's...
Okay, so let's go over how much does an F-35 cost?
Well, it depends on the variant, but...
100 million? Safe to say? 100 million a copy? Okay, so we just had the Air Force in here, and I said, what percentage of these F-35s are fully mission capable? And they said 29%. Do you have any basis to disagree with that assessment?
I don't have any basis to disagree with the Secretary.
So at 100 million a copy, 29% being fully mission capable, does that seem low to you?
It's a complex airframe, and again, there are a number of reasons why a platform could be not operational at any one given time. But
right, but I mean,
but
how many?
Having said that, it is one of the best aircraft in the inventory.
The best aircraft in the inventory. Well, Mr. Secretary, there's a GAO report that takes a very different view. Mr. Chairman, I seek unanimous consent to enter the GAO report entitled F-35 Sustainment Cost Will Continue to Rise While Planned Use and Availability Have Decreased.
Without objection, so ordered.
It reads, cost to sustain the F-35 fleet keep increasing from $1.1 trillion in 2018 to $1.58 trillion in 2023. Yet DoD plans to fly the F-35 less than originally estimated, partly because of reliability issues with the aircraft. The F-35's ability to perform its mission has also trended downward over the last 5 years. Is there any of that in the GAO report that you disagree with?
I don't. No.
Okay, so how many $100 million paperweights do we own?
I would not categorize the F-35 as a paperweight.
Well, if it's not mission capable, if it's what do we just stare at it and admire it?
We continue to work to make sure that we get our aircraft operational and continue to. And
I don't know. Don't you think at 100 million a clip, more than 29% should be fully operational? And if the fact that we can't get them operational, you know what Secretary Kendall said when he was sitting in that chair? He said the core root of the problem is that we had let Lockheed Martin build this thing, and then we gave Lockheed Martin the full system performance contract, and they keep bilking us according to the GAO, and we sit around staring at $100 million airplane that can't fully perform the mission, and you're sitting here telling me it's not a failure. Just own up to it, Mr. Secretary. Just say, this airframe has not delivered, it's too costly, it's not being utilized as we should, and we should never again make the mistake of doing a full system performance contract with the very person who built the aircraft. Could we agree to that?
I agree. In the future, we should have a different approach. I'm sure that Secretary Kendall also told you
the committee is going
the
to
things that he was doing to get the
approach quite quickly.
Concurrency overlaps development and production has required retrofits costing $1.4 billion, and Lockheed faces financial penalties, with the Pentagon withholding $7 million per undelivered TR-3 jet, totaling $600 million in 2024. Meanwhile, CEO Jim Treslet's report $928,000 in corporate jet expenses per Lockheed's 2025 statement has fueled perceptions of executive excess. DEI and political controversies are also a distraction. A Breitbart report accused Lockheed of prioritizing diversity, equity, and inclusion (DEI) over engineering, citing senior VP Shelley O'Neill Stoneman as the Trump-hating woke warrior. Lockheed's website emphasizes DEI as a core value, but no direct evidence links these efforts to F-35 issues. Claims of cronyism between Air Force Secretary Frank Kendall and the CEO of Lockheed over an $11.8 billion contract remains speculative, and no radar claim on social media is also misleading. The F-35's AN/APG-81 radar functions, but it suffers TR-3-related instability, with fixes planned in 2025. And there's an impact on international partners, Australia and beyond. The F-35's troubles reverberate globally, affecting 20 partner nations, including Australia, Canada, the UK, Israel, Japan, and others. These countries, integral to the Joint Strike Fighter program, have collectively ordered over 900 jets, with Australia leading as one of the largest buyers. And Australia's stake and challenges. Australia has committed to purchasing 72 F-35As for the Royal Australian Air Force, RAF, with 60 delivered by October 2024 at a total cost of 17 billion Australian dollars, which is about 11 billion US. The F-35 is central to Australia's defence strategy, replacing the ageing F-18 Hornets to counter growing regional threats, particularly from China's expanding military capabilities, including its J-20 stealth fighter. The TR-3 delays have disrupted Australia's modernisation plans. The RAF's F-35s, like those in the US, are currently limited to training roles until TR-3 is fully implemented, potentially delaying full operational capability, FOC, beyond 2025. This leaves Australia's reliant on legacy aircraft longer than planned, straining maintenance budgets and operational readiness. The Australian National Audit Office, ANAO, noted in 2023 that sustainment costs for the F-35 fleet are 30% higher than projected, averaging 360 million Australian dollars annually, with spare parts shortages making downtime longer. And Australia's strategic environment simplifies these concerns. The 2023 Defence Strategic Review emphasised the need for advanced capabilities in the Indo-Pacific, where China's J-20 and naval expansion pose direct challenges. Delays in achieving F-35 combat readiness could weaken Australia's deterrence posture, particularly in contested areas like the South China Sea. And other international partners like Canada. Canada ordered 88 F-35As in 2023 for 19 billion Canadian dollars, with delivery starting in 2026. TR-3 delays could push back operational timelines, impacting plans to replace CF-18 Hornets. Sustainment costs estimated at 54 billion Canadian dollars over 30 years are already a concern for Canadian taxpayers. And in the United Kingdom, the UK has 34 of its planned 138 F-35Bs used for carrier operations. TR-3 issues and radar-absorbent skin degradation on F-35Cs raise concerns about the jet's performance in maritime environments, critical for the Royal Navy's carrier strike group. And in Israel operates 50 F-35ISs with combat-proven missions in Iranian airspace, while Israel has customized its jets. TR-3 delays could limit upgrades, affecting its edge in the volatile Middle East. And in Japan and South Korea, both nations rely on F-35s to counter China and North Korea. Japan has 42 of the 147 planned jets, while South Korea operates 40 of the 60. Delays and rising costs strain defense budgets, potentially forcing reliance on older aircraft like Japan's F-15s or South Korea's F-16s. And its European partners, nations like Norway, Denmark, and the Netherlands, face similar issues, with TR-3 delays affecting NATO interoperability. High sustainment costs have prompted some, like Norway, to explore reduced fleet sizes. And the international partners share F-35's development costs through competitive agreements, but they have limited influence over Lockheed's performance. The program's global supply chain, involving 45 countries, means defects like spare parts shortages affect all operators. A 2024 report from the Centre of Strategic and International Studies noted that allies are increasingly frustrated by Lockheed's inability to deliver on time, with some considering diversifying their fleets to mitigate risks. And what are the strategic implications and criticisms? The F-35's issues have sparked debates about its role in modern warfare. Elon Musk has called it the worst military value for money in history, advocating for drones over manned fighters.
Certainly stirred it up and took shots at the old F-35. Despite its stealth characteristics, he's gunning for it, saying it's obsolete. In fact, last week, he put out a tweet saying that the F-35 design was broken at its requirements level because it has too many things and too many people. It was expensive, complex, jack of all trades, master of none. Success was never in the set of possible outcomes. And manned fighter jets are obsolete in the age of drones anyways. It's just going to get pilots killed.
President-elect Donald Trump reportedly considered cancelling the F-35 contract in 2024, though Lockheed dismissed this as fake news. Air Force Secretary Frank Kendall has vowed to apply F-35 lessons to the Next Generation Air Dominance program, but Lockheed's loss of the NGAD contract to Boeing intensifies pressure on its F-35 performance. For international partners, the F-35 delays and costs strain defence budgets and erode trust in US leadership. Australia and others face a dilemma: continue investing in a troubled program or seek alternative, risking interoperability with NATO and US forces. China's J-20, produced at a faster pace, underscores the urgency of resolving F-35 issues to maintain a technological edge. And in conclusion, it's a global wake-up call. The F-35 program exemplifies ambition outpacing execution, with consequences extending far beyond the US borders. For Australia, the delays in achieving full combat readiness threaten its Indo-Pacific strategy, while rising costs burden taxpayers. Other partners, from Canada to Japan, face similar challenges, balancing reliance on the F-35 with growing frustrations over Lockheed's performance. Lockheed Martin must prioritise its engineering over corporate optics, whether DEI or executive perks. The Pentagon and international partners must hold the company accountable, ensuring contracts reflecting progress, not promises. For taxpayers in the US, Australia and beyond, the F-35's $2 trillion price tag demands rigorous oversight. As adversaries advance, the window to deliver a reliable F-35 is narrowing. The program's success or failure will shape global air sovereignty for decades. And let's get on to the Budapest Memorandum, which was a misunderstood handshake. The Ukrainians keep saying that they gave up their nuclear weapons, but they were the USSR's. So let's get into this. And Richard Branson, like many, seems to think he grasped the Budapest Memorandum. He doesn't. And he's not alone. The 1994 agreement is often cited as a sacred pact betrayed by Russia, but in reality, it's far murkier. So let's unpack the truth. In 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed, leaving Ukraine, Belarus, where I am now, and Kazakhstan with Soviet nuclear arsenals on their soil. But these weren't functional weapons. The launch codes remained in Moscow, rendering the missiles useless to their new hosts. These three nations couldn't fire a single warhead, even if they wanted to. So enter the Budapest Memorandum, signed in 1994, and the deal was straightforward. Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT, as non-nuclear states, relinquishing the Soviet arsenals. In return, the United States, United Kingdom, and Russia offered security assurances, not guarantees, assurances to respect their sovereignty and territorial integrity. Note the term assurances. These were not legally binding treaties. There was no enforcement mechanisms, no penalties for violations, just political commitments, vague and unenforceable. What's often overlooked is its broader context. In 1993, Russia agreed to shoulder the Soviet Union's entire foreign debt, including obligations from other former republics, and even Tsarist-era loans from before 1917. This was a colossal burden, and by 1998, Russia defaulted. Meanwhile, Ukraine, Belarus, and Kazakhstan started their post-Soviet lives debt-free. Russia has since paid off those loans. In exchange, Russia was recognized as the USSR's successor state, inheriting its UN Security Council seat, diplomatic properties, and control of the Soviet nuclear arsenal. The Budapest Memorandum was part of a grand bargain, not a standalone promise. Now, the narrative often points Russia as the sole villain, particularly for the 2014 annexation of Crimea. But the memorandum's history of violations isn't so one-sided. The United States and the United Kingdom were first to breach it. Spirit in 2006, imposing sanctions on Belarus over its presidential elections, violating Article 3's commitment to refrain from economic coercion. More sanctions followed later years. In 2013, Washington explicitly stated the memorandum wasn't legally binding, undermining its weight. Russia's actions in Crimea were a clear violation, but they weren't the first. The precedent was set. The memorandum was no sacred covenant. The Budapest Memorandum was a diplomatic handshake born of post-Cold War optimism and pragmatic deal-making. It was not a security guarantee, despite how it's often portrayed. Its violations by multiple parties reflect its inherent weaknesses, political promises, not enforceable laws. So in conclusion, the Budapest Memorandum is a lesson in fragility of diplomatic agreements. It was never the ironclad shield many imagine, but a loose arrangement broken by more than one hand. Richard Branson and others who invoke it as a symbol of betrayal miss this nuance. Understanding its true nature, political, not legal, pragmatic, not sacred, reveals why it failed to prevent conflict. In a world of competing interests, handshakes alone do not ensure peace. The Holodomor Myth, a fairytale for the historically illiterate. The narrative surrounding the Holodomor, often portrayed as a deliberate genocide orchestrated by the Soviet government to exterminate Ukrainians, has heavily been debated. However, a closer examination of historical facts reveals a different story, one rooted in complexity rather than conspiracy. A significant portion of the Soviet Union's Jewish population resided in Ukraine, a legacy of the Russian Empire's Pale of Settlement, which confined Jews primarily to areas like modern-day Ukraine and Belarus. When the Soviet authorities lifted these restrictions, most Jews remained in these regions rather than relocating across Russia. If the Soviet government had intended to exterminate Ukrainians or Christians during the 1931-1933 famine, it would have also devastated its own Jewish population, as well as Muslims in Kazakhstan, where the famine also struck. This undermines the claim of targeted ethnic destruction. Russia's agricultural system, both before and after the Bolshevik Revolution, was plagued by inefficiencies. Famines were a recurring tragedy under the Tsarist rule, occurring in 1873, 1891 to 1892, 1901 to 1902, 1905 to 1907, 1911, and 1915 to 1917. Post-revolution famines persisted in 1917 to 1918, 1920 to 1923, 1924 to 1925, 1928 to 1929, and 1931 to 1933, the latter being labelled the Holodomor. The Soviet collectivization effort aimed to modernize agriculture by establishing collective farms, providing machinery, and paying peasants like industrial workers. This restructuring, while disruptive, ultimately ended the cycle of regular famines, with only one notable post-World War II famine in 1940s caused by environmental factors. Archival evidence further challenges the genocide narrative. Documents confirm that the Soviet government sent millions of tons of grain to Ukraine during the famine and halted grain exports from the region. One document details food deliveries to 40 Ukrainian districts, while another orders the redistribution of grain to combat starvation. These actions indicate government support, not intentional starvation. The Soviet policy of Korenization, if I butchered that, Korenizatsia, in the 1920s and 30s promoted Ukrainian identity through language standardization, school textbooks, and cultural development. This Ukrainianization efforts contradicts the idea of a genocidal intent to erase Ukrainian culture. Why would a government foster a national identity only to destroy it? The Holodomor narrative gained traction through dubious sources like Thomas Walker, an American con artist who falsely claimed to have witnessed a Ukrainian genocide Walker never visited Ukraine, and his photos, some from the 1921-1922 Russian famine or even the American Great Depression, were exposed as fraudulent in the US courts. Similarly, Welsh journalist Gareth Jones reported on the 1933 famine but attributed it to economic mismanagement and poor harvests, not ethnic targeting. His grandson later clarified that Jones' account was distorted by Ukrainian nationalists and Cold War propagandists. Russia has consistently denied that the Holodomor was a genocide, emphasizing that the famine was not intentional and should be not politicized. The Russians' Duma's official statements, accessible on its website, reinforce this position. The Holodomor narrative has been heavily promoted by Ukraine nationalists, some of whom have ties to controversial figures like Stefan Bandera, a Nazi collaborator during World War II. This propaganda, rooted in wartime anti-Bolshevik sentiment, portrays the famine as a Jewish Bolshevik plot against Christian Ukrainians. Since 2014, similar nationalist groups have been implicated in suppressing Russian-speaking populations in the Donbass while promoting a pure Slavic identity. Accounts on social media amplify this rhetoric, even expressing admiration for Hitler. So in conclusion, the Holodomor, while a tragic famine, was not aligned with characteristics of a deliberate genocide when examined through historical evidence. Soviet policies, archival records, and the broader context of famines in Russia history point to systematic agricultural failures and economic challenges, not ethnic targeting. The narrative's persistence owes much to Ukrainian nationalist propaganda, which has leveraged historical suffering for political gain. To fully understand the Holodomor, one must look beyond sensationalization accounts and engage with primary sources and historical context, and only then can the line between tragedy and myth be clearly drawn. Still in that location, Russia's strategic restraint in Ukraine, undermining the Maidan narrative. Since the onset of the Ukraine conflict in 2022, Russia has conducted its military operations with a level of restraint that stands in stark contrast to the expectations set by decades of Western portrayals of Russian aggression. Contrary to the Ukrainian government's claims of widespread atrocities, the Russian campaign has resulted in fewer civilian casualties than might be expected in a conflict of this scale. For context, the United Nations estimates civilian deaths in Ukraine at around 10,000 over the 3 years, a figure that, while tragic, is notably lower than the estimated 7,000 to 12,000 civilian deaths during the 3-week US-led invasion of Iraq in 2003. This relative restraint, often overlooked in Western discourse, is not merely a tactical choice, but a deliberate strategy that targets a critical vulnerability in Ukraine's post-2014 national identity. The Maidan regime, established after the 2014 coup, has sought to redefine Ukraine as an anti-Russia, a Western-aligned militarized state that positions itself as the true heir to the ancient Slavic heritage, while casting Russia as the eternal oppressor. Central to this project is the narrative of Ukrainian victimhood, portraying the nation as a beleaguered colony suffering under Russian domination. This narrative, rooted in the selective reading of history that downplays Ukraine's privileged status within the Soviet Union under leaders like Khrushchev and Brezhnev, has been amplified during the current war. Ukrainian authorities have consistently accused Russia of indiscriminate attacks and war crimes, using these allegations to rally domestic support and secure Western backing. However, this narrative is increasingly disconnected from the reality experienced by ordinary Ukrainians. Civilians in Ukraine are no strangers to the war's disruptions. Air raid sirens, power outages, and the occasional sight of a missile strikes are part of daily life. Yet, for most, the direct impact of Russian attacks is minimal compared to the immediate threats posed by their own government's policies. Forced conscription, economic hardship, and Zelensky, the dictator's administration's heavy-handed governance, loom larger than the spectre of Ukrainian. Far from feeling like a victim of Russian aggression, is more likely to view the government's war crime allegations as exaggerated or hollow. This disconnect undermines the Maidan's regime's careful crafted image of a nation united under a barbaric foe. Russia's restrained approach is not born of sentimentality or weakness, despite what some hardline voices in its own commentary might argue. Rather, it is a calculated move to erode one of the foundational pillars of the Maidan-era Ukraine, its claim to moral superiority through victimhood. By minimizing civilian casualties and focusing on military targets, Russia denies Ukraine the visceral, unifying atrocities that could fuel long-term resentment and resistance. This strategy is particularly significant given the cultural and historical ties between the two nations, which the Maidan project seeks to sever. Russia's actions suggest a long-term vision, one that prioritizes setting the stage for a post-war Ukraine that is not demilitarized, but also open to reconciliation and restoration of fraternal bonds. This approach also has practical implications for post-war landscape. Without credible tales of Russian brutality to galvanize future generations, the Maidan narrative of eternal enmity may struggle to take root. Instead, Russia is laying the groundwork for a Ukraine that might one day see itself not as an anti-Russian nation, but as a partner in the shared cultural and historical space. This is not to say that Russia's campaign is without flaws or moral complexities. War, by its nature, is brutal, and no side emerges untainted. However, the strategic restraint displayed by Russia reveals a sophistication that goes beyond mere military objectives, targeting the ideological core of its opponent. And in conclusion, Russia's conduct in Ukraine conflict reflects a broader strategy that transcends immediate battlefield gains. By fighting the relatively clean war, Russia is not only preserving its moral credibility, but also dismantling the Maidan regime's narrative of victimhood, which has been central to Ukraine's post-2014 identity. This approach, while costly and controversial, sets the stage for a post-war Ukraine that may be more amenable to peace and cultural reconnection. Whether this gamble succeeds remains to be seen, but it underscores Russia's commitment to playing the long game, one that prioritizes shaping the future over settling scores in the present. And I'm still talking about Ukraine. So here we are, Britain's unrealistic ambitions exposed in the Ukraine conflict. UK media has long exaggerated Britain's military prowess since the Ukraine conflict began, yet recently reports reveal that Britain would be struggled to deploy even 5,000 troops as part of a proposed deterrence force in Ukraine. Whitehall's policymakers must abandon grandiose ideas and prioritize peace. On April 29th this year, the Times reported that Europe would struggle to muster 25,000 troops for Ukraine, a stark contrast to its earlier claims of role in Ukraine's 2023 counter-offensive. Prime Minister Keir Starmer has sought to align US and European policies, announcing a coalition of the willing and the March to Lancaster House summit to support Ukraine post-ceasefire. This coalition aimed to deploy European troops to defend a deal and ensure peace. The coalition's four goals: sustaining military aid to Ukraine, intensifying sanctions on Russia, enhancing Ukraine's post-war defenses, and deploying a peacekeeping force, lack a coherent strategy. Continued military aid and sanctions are likely to prolong the conflict, not resolve it. Russia has consistently adapted to sanctions, rendering them ineffective, while further arming Ukraine disincentivize peace talks. Ukraine's calls for more sanctions, even pre-war, reflect this flawed approach. Boosting Ukraine's defenses post-peace equates rearmament, undermining long-term stability. With 800,000 troops and $120 billion in aid since 2022, Ukraine's military is already formidable. Additional funding is unrealistic. The US under President Trump is unlikely to contribute, and the EU's $800 billion rearmament plan faces domestic resistance in countries like France and Italy. Ukraine cannot sustain its current military without unsustainable European subsidies. Peacekeeping force, later rebranded a deterrence force, was equally unfeasible. Britain and Europe lacked the troops, with the UK struggling to deploy 5,000 soldiers compared to the 6 million mobilised under Churchill in World War II. Russia has rejected NATO forces near the conflict line, and the US has pressured Britain to scale back plans. Any European presence would likely be limited to training Ukraine's forces in western Ukraine, far from the front. This reveals a pattern of British policy failures, announcing ambitious plans without assessing feasibility, consulting allies, or anticipating Russia's response. Proposals like Macron mediating with Putin have fizzled out. Instead, Whitehall churns out sound bites for a pro-war media, only to admit later that plans are unworkable. And in conclusion, Britain's over-ambitious posturing in the Ukraine conflict has exposed its military and strategic limitations. Rather than chasing unattainable goals, Whitehall must adopt a pragmatic approach, engaging in both Ukraine and Russia in dialogue to pursue sustainable peace. Only through realistic, coordinated efforts can the UK contribute meaningful to the end of the conflict. Yellowstone, the supervolcano that breathes so it doesn't explode. So deep beneath Yellowstone National Park lies a geological titan, a supervolcano capable of reshaping the continent. For over 500,000 years, this restless giant has avoided catastrophic eruption, and scientists are now uncovering why. It's been breathing. A newly discovered magma cap located just 2.6 miles below the surface acts like a pressure valve, venting heat and gas to keep the volcano on a low simmer rather than an explosive boil. This magma cap, a porous layer of molten minerals laced with supercritical water bubbles, neither liquid nor gas, but a furious hybrid, plays a critical role in stabilizing Yellowstone's volcanic system. These bubbles, trapped under immense pressure, are slowly seeping out, diffusing the pent-up energy that could trigger otherwise a super eruption. It's nature's version of counting to 10, a slow release that's been preventing disaster for millennia. The discovery came thanks to cutting-edge technology and a bit of seismic stomping. Researchers deployed a 24,000 kilogram vibrosis truck, a massive machine that vibrates the ground to create seismic waves. By listening to the echoes, scientists mapped the subsurface, revealing the magma cap structure and behavior. This breakthrough has provided a clearer picture of Yellowstone's workings, showing how it regulates itself to avoid cataclysmic outburst. For now, the findings are reassuring. The slow venting of gas and heat suggests Yellowstone isn't gearing up for a super eruption anytime soon. However, the volcano remains dynamic, and ongoing monitoring is essential to understand its long-term behavior. Yellowstone's breathing mechanism is a reminder of the delicate balance within Earth's most powerful systems, a balance that has so far spared the US from a volcanic apocalypse. And in conclusion, Yellowstone's supervolcano is a force of nature that both commands awe and vigilance. The discovery of its breathing magma cap unveils natural safeguard, allowing the volcano to release pressure, gradually avoiding a catastrophic eruption. While this offers reassurance for now, it also underscores the importance of continued research and monitoring. Yellowstone's steady exhale is a testament to the Earth's complex mechanisms, but it's a reminder that even a simmering giant can never be taken for granted. And if there is an apocalypse, let's look at the hidden depths of elite survival, underground cities, and the 2030 agenda. In a recent interview with Tucker Carlson, financial expert Catherine Austin Fitz unveiled a disturbing claim that has sent shockwaves through independent research circles. The global elite have constructed vast underground cities hidden from public view, designated as self-sustaining ecosystems. These are not just mere bunkers or military outposts, but sprawling subterranean complexes, some allegedly as large as surface cities, complete with energy grids, transportation networks, food production systems, and long-term living infrastructure. Built in secrecy using black budgets and off-book contractors, these facilities report number up to 170 worldwide, connected by underground rail systems. hidden airports, or even undersea transport routes. Locations are said to be concealed beneath mountains, deserts, or deep ocean floors, with some documented in obscure government records or exposed by whistleblowers, while many remain entirely off the public radar. The scale and secrecy of these projects raise a pressing question: why? Fitz and other insiders suggest the elite are preparing for a catastrophic event, potentially an extension-level disaster, whether cosmic, geophysical, or engineered. Some speculate it could be tied to biblical prophecies such as Revelation 6:15-16, which describes the powerful hiding in caves from divine judgment. Others point to more earthly motives, like the controlled depopulation agenda or a bid to maintain dominance over a radically transformed world. I'm going for the pole shift. The lack of transparency fuels suspicions, as these facilities are reportedly funded without public oversight, hidden behind layers of classified operations. Central to this narrative is the year 2030, a focal point for globalist initiatives like the United Nations Agenda 2030. This plan, often framed as a sustainable development framework, includes elements that critics argue are tools for unprecedented control. Smart cities with constant surveillance, digital IDs to restrict access to services, central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, that can remotely be disabled, and universal basic income, UBI, as a carrot for compliance. Together, these systems could create a world where every movement, transaction, and communication is tracked and controlled. The infrastructure for this vision is already being rolled out globally, from pilot CBDC programs in countries like China and India to smart city projects in Saudi Arabia and Singapore. The urgency surrounding 2030 suggests the elite may anticipate a pivotal event or shift. Some researchers analysing the posts on social media point to theories about solar flares, pole shifts, or even orchestrated crises like pandemics or economic collapses. Others, citing Fitz warnings, believe the elite are bracing for a societal breakdown where dissent is impossible under technocratic regime. The existence of underground cities could be their insurance policy, a means to survive chaos, while the surface world grapples with disaster or control. The Freedom Train International, a group highlighted by Jim Ferguson's post, advocates for resistance through self-sufficiency. They urge people to live off-grid, grow their own food, build resilient communities, and secure their families with practical knowledge and tools. Their message is clear. The window to prepare is narrowing, and the reliance on centralized systems is a trap. This aligns with broader sentiments on social media, where users express distrust in institutional narratives and call for decentralized independent living. And in conclusion, the claims about underground cities and a looming 2030 agenda paint a chilling picture of a world divided between the prepared elite and the unsuspecting public. While the full truth remains obscured and documented existence of classified bunkers, the push for digital control systems and the elite's focus on 2030 lend credence to concerns about hidden agendas. Whether driven by fear of catastrophe, divine judgment, or a desire for total control, these developments demand scrutiny. The call to action is not to succumb to fear, but to embrace preparedness, building resilience, fostering independence, and rejecting systems designed to enslave. As the clock ticks towards 2030, the choice is ours: comply or break free. This Friday, May 9th, Minsk will commemorate the 80th anniversary of Victory Day with a grand military parade on Victor's Avenue. The event honours the Soviet Union's triumph over Nazi Germany in World War II and stands as a testament to Belarus's enduring respect for its wartime heroes. Over 4,000 participants, including motorised riflemen, paratroopers, cadets, and representatives of various military and civil institutions, will march in unison. The mechanised column will showcase more than 220 units of military hardware, blending historical and modern equipment. Leading the procession will be the legendary T-34 tanks, followed by contemporary models like the T-72B3, BMT-2, and Paulet's missile system. A unique feature of this year's parade will be a historical reenactment segment. Participants will don miraculously reconstructed uniforms and carry period-accurate weaponry, recreating scenes reminiscent of the 1945 Moscow Victory Parade. This segment aims to honor the legacy of those who fought, to educate younger generations about the sacrifices made during the Great Patriotic War. The parade will also pay tribute to the partisan units that played a role crucial in Belarus's resistance efforts. Representatives will march in formation, reflecting the bravery and resilience of these fighters. As the nation reflects on 8 decades since the end of World War II, the Victory Day Parade in Minsk serves as both a solemn remembrance and a celebration of peace and unity. And here's some videos of them practicing the other night. And we will be streaming live on our channel of the parade. So tune in on Friday, May 9th. Look out for notices on X, Telegram, and Getter, and Facebook. And again, we'll be streaming live May 9th, the 80th anniversary of the Victory Day Parade in Minsk, Belarus. Here's some videos.
Днем Победы! Ура!
Wow, what a show, folks. That's a wrap on live show 129. We've just torn through the biggest stories shaking the planet. From Trump's tariffs sending global markets into a tailspin, to Huawei's AI leap, Yellowstone's volcanic rumblings, and the elite's shadowy survival plans. We've left no stone unturned. We've challenged narratives on Russia's strategy in Ukraine, debunked the Holodomor debunked the Holodomor myth, unpacked the Budapest Memorandum, and exposed the F-35 stealth jet fiasco. And let's not forget the ice rink action. We've covered the thrilling Belarus, Kazakhstan, and Russia hockey series, with Belarus dominating both teams so far. And we'll be at the next game May 8th. So check out exclusive videos and photos on Telegram, Rumble, and YouTube channels. Speaking of big events, May 9th marks the 80th anniversary of the Victory Day over Germany, and we'll be streaming the epic Minsk parade live. You don't want to miss that. Looking ahead, we've got a packed week. On Wednesday, May 7th, we're back in the studio for a live show with a familiar face, a guest from the UK who's been on before and is visiting again. Then on Sunday, May 11th, we're joined by a renowned German journalist, Patrick Babb, who's written books, taught at top institutions, and witnessed both sides of the Ukraine war in the Donbass and the West. We'll grill him on the conflict, the EU, and more. Mark your calendars. And a quick note, I wasn't in the studio tonight because I'm upgrading our computer systems, and I just got back from abroad and didn't have time to test them. But I'll be back in the studio for this Wednesday's live show and the Victory Day Parade on Friday. Thanks for bearing with me. Huge thanks for tuning in tonight, and big thank to our sponsor, Emotional Support Animals Registry. Their website addresses are down below, and don't forget to subscribe to their Emotional Support Animals show on YouTube. Please hit the thumbs up, share the video, and keep the conversation going in the comments. You're what makes this show special. See you Wednesday for the truth, for more fire, more unfiltered takes. This is live show 129 signing off from Minsk. Stay sharp.